Every father knows the unbearable weight of failing to provide for his child, but for Mark Ellison, that weight had become a crushing reality. After losing his wife Sarah to cancer, his job in construction, and nearly all his savings, he found himself with just $3,000 left to his name. It was money that most would have used for rent or groceries, but Mark spent it on something that made the entire town laugh at him. A cold, gray, abandoned World War II bunker on the outskirts of Cedar Falls. Locals called it the concrete tomb, mocking the idea that anyone could live there. His neighbors whispered he had lost his mind, and his mother-in-law even threatened to take his 8-year-old daughter Emma away, arguing that she needed stability, not her father's desperate schemes. But as Mark drove his rattling pickup toward the overgrown property, Sarah's words echoed in his head. "Home isn't a place. It's where we choose to build our love." Emma, still clinging to the warmth of her mother's memory, tried to stay positive, asking if this strange building could really become their home. Mark didn't have the answer, but he knew one thing: he would do whatever it took to keep his daughter with him. What neither of them realized was that beneath those cold concrete floors, hidden for 70 years, lay a secret worth over $200 million. And once uncovered, that secret would draw dangerous eyes toward them. From the moment they stepped inside, the bunker felt more like a cavern of forgotten history than a home. The air was stale with dust and time, the walls marked by decades of weather, and the rooms littered with rusted barrels, broken crates, and yellowed newspapers from the 1940s. To Emma's innocent eyes, though, it was larger and brighter than their cramped apartment, full of possibilities. She chose a chamber with a small window that let in a beam of sunlight and announced it would be her new bedroom. For Mark, every corner whispered with both hope and despair. He knew the work it would take to make this bunker livable, but for the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope. As they cleaned, Emma discovered a wounded bird with a bruised wing. She named it Hope, recalling her mother's favorite Emily Dickinson line, "Hope is the thing with feathers." Watching Emma care for that fragile bird reminded Mark of Sarah's resilience and gave him the strength to keep pushing forward. Yet as he cleared debris from the northwest corner of the main chamber, something unusual caught his eye. A section of the concrete floor looked different, rougher, as though it had been replaced. When his screwdriver slipped into a gap, Mark realized the floor might not be solid at all. Beneath their new home, something was waiting. The next morning, Mark left Emma at school and drove to an equipment rental yard, his heart pounding with equal parts dread and anticipation. For $60, money he didn't really have to spare, he borrowed a hydraulic jack and returned to the bunker. Alone in the eerie silence, he pried open the suspicious blocks. They groaned as they shifted, revealing a metal ladder that descended into blackness. His construction instincts told him this was no ordinary repair. This was deliberate concealment. Flashlight in hand, Mark climbed down and entered a hidden chamber untouched since World War II. What he found stopped his breath. Stacked crates reinforced with metal bands held rows of gold coins, stamped with the Third Reich insignia, glittering jewels and gemstones that caught the beam of his flashlight like shards of frozen fire. Ledgers in multiple languages recorded inventories worth fortunes, while a military footlocker bore the faded emblem of the U.S. Army. Inside was a letter from 1945, stamped with official seals, instructing that the recovered assets, loot stolen by the Nazis, were to remain classified indefinitely. Mark realized he wasn't standing in a forgotten storage room. He was standing in the middle of a secret U.S. war recovery operation called Golden Dawn. A treasure deliberately hidden from the world for 70 years had just become his burden. At first, Mark didn't know what to do. That night, he sat at the kitchen table with a single gold coin and a small ruby he had taken as samples. Both seemed to pulse with dangerous promise. One coin alone was worth $3,000, nearly the exact amount he'd spent on the bunker. The ruby, as he would later learn, could fetch tens of thousands. But the true discovery wasn't just wealth, it was history. Documents detailed Nazi thefts, Allied recoveries, and notes suggesting that some high-ranking officials had secretly diverted stolen goods into private collections. Colonel Morrison, the officer in charge of the recovery team, had even left a journal expressing fear that Holocaust victims' property would never be returned. For Mark, the treasure represented both salvation and danger. Emma noticed his unease and asked why he seemed happy different. Mark told her that sometimes when good things happen, we must handle them gently, like the way she had cared for Hope. But deep down, he knew this treasure was not a blessing he could simply claim. It was a storm that could swallow them both. And the storm came quickly. At the local diner, old-timers whispered about wartime trucks and rumors of Nazi gold stored in the bunker. At an antique shop, a dealer confirmed the coin's authenticity and warned Mark about legal complications. Nazi gold, stolen artwork, Holocaust victim property. None of it could be easily sold without attracting attention. Soon, Mark noticed men watching him, and then came the visit from Agent James Thompson of the Treasury's Historical Assets Division. The agent's polite smile couldn't hide the sharpness in his eyes as he examined the bunker. He warned Mark that such discoveries attracted dangerous people, treasure hunters, black market dealers, ruthless men who would hurt families for profit. But Thompson himself wasn't trustworthy. Professor Davies, a local historian, later revealed that he had ties to private collectors who paid fortunes for wartime loot. Just as Mark struggled to decide who to trust, an unsigned note appeared at his door. "We know what you found. We'll be in touch soon to discuss terms." The threats had arrived. Mark's desperate gamble on an abandoned bunker had turned into a game of survival. It wasn't long before the faceless threat gained a name. A late-night phone call introduced him to Victor and Dmitry Koslov, notorious black market artifact dealers with deep ties to collectors of Nazi memorabilia. They had somehow learned about his discovery and even sent him a photograph of Emma walking out of school, proof that they could reach her any time. They demanded a meeting, promising millions if he cooperated and ruin if he didn't. For Mark, it was no longer about gold, jewels, or ledgers. It was about keeping his daughter safe. Torn between the government, shady agents, ruthless dealers, and the haunting words in Morrison's journal, Mark turned to Professor Davies for guidance. She confirmed the treasure's value, over $200 million in today's money, and revealed that Mark's own grandfather, William Ellison, had been part of Morrison's unit. A letter from Morrison, hidden in the chamber, even named the Ellison family as guardians of the treasure, entrusted to return it one day to the rightful heirs. What had seemed like blind chance was actually destiny. Mark hadn't just stumbled upon history. He had inherited a responsibility generations in the making. But destiny didn't make the situation less dangerous. Strangers prowled the property at night with military precision, searching for the chamber. Professor Davies' office was ransacked, her research stolen. and Emma's innocence became Mark's greatest vulnerability. He began hiding copies of his documentation in multiple places, knowing someone would try to silence him. As the Koslov brothers tightened their grip, Mark faced an impossible decision: surrender the treasure to criminals, risk everything with a government he didn't trust, or honor Morrison's dying wish to return stolen heritage to Holocaust families. Sarah's words came back to him: "When you don't know what to do, start with what you know is right." And what Mark knew was right was protecting Emma, no matter the cost. He prepared for battle, aware that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to take the next step even when terrified. With enemies circling, history pressing down, and a secret worth hundreds of millions beneath his feet, Mark Ellison realized he was no longer just a desperate father. He had become the keeper of a truth the world had forgotten. And so the question remains: what would you do if you uncovered a treasure hidden for 70 years, a fortune tainted with the suffering of millions, and powerful men willing to kill to possess it? Would you take the money and run, hand it over to a government that might bury it again, or risk everything to fulfill the promise of justice long denied? For Mark Ellison, the answer was not simple, and his story doesn't end here. The shadows around his bunker grew darker, the threats sharper, and the choices more dangerous. What began as a desperate father's gamble for survival had become a battle for truth, legacy, and the life of his daughter. And as the world closed in, one thing was certain: secrets this big never stay buried forever. If you want to know how this story unfolds, make sure you stay with us, because tomorrow I have another story that will make you question what you think you know about history, family, and the hidden treasures that still lie beneath our feet. Subscribe now, because the next chapter might just be the most shocking one yet.